Hey guys, it's Cam here. Welcome back to the Build Room. In this week's episode, we are working on Doofa again, our aviation-themed 1977 Celica. And this week, it is getting some much needed interior upgrades. So stick around and check it out. All right, so this is Doofa Now as it stands at the moment. If you remember in the last episode, we finally got this thing inspected and it passed first time, and we also got it registered for road use. So it's looking pretty good, to be honest. I will note there is a fairly significant lack of surface rust here. For everyone that was really concerned that this thing is just gonna spontaneously rust in a matter of seconds because it's got no paint on it, that's really not the case. You've gotta have some contaminants on the surface or it get wet for that to actually happen. It's now been in bare metal for probably about, I would say nearly 2 months, and it's looking pretty good. You can see there's some areas like here, we've got some fingerprints, and that will have been when the guys were doing the tires. They've lifted themselves up off there, and obviously across the door, previous to me putting the interior in for the inspection, I didn't have this handle on. So every time I was getting in, fingers over the top and pulling the door shut. So all of those natural oils in your hands cause the corrosion that you're seeing there. But you know what? It's still probably a 9 out of 10. So I'm pretty comfortable to leave it like this for a little while. As I said, probably gonna come back around and sat and clear this entire thing. But for now, I just wanna get this thing out on the road. It is coming into summer in WA, and coast cruises during summer here are absolutely, and there's also a couple of car shows that I want to get into as well, and some of them are fairly reasonable drives away, you know, sort of an hour drive to get to. So I want this thing to be comfortable. Now it's driving really well, I got to say. There's no power at all, which is something I'll have to address separately, but it is nice and smooth. It feels pretty reliable. The only issue I've got is a little clunk in the left-hand strut, which I think might be a gland nut, which is loose, but I'll probably just address that off camera. But basically, it's all dressed up and it needs somewhere to go. So let me get some lights set up because it's pretty dark in the interior, even with the garage lights on, and I'll show you what we're getting up to this week. All right, so got some lighting. Hopefully it doesn't blind us while we're trying to have a look at this thing, but let's check it out. So we tidied this up a fair bit before we even took it to get registered. So, you know, I changed the door trims, we sorted out the center console, we neatened up a bunch of loose wiring and things like that. So in its current state, I would rate this interior as passable. Maybe even bordering on good considering the age of the car, but passable for now. But there are a bunch of things that could really do with a little bit of love, and they would make a big difference when I'm driving this, because I don't get to see the livery on the outside. This being my wheelhouse, I want it to look nice and neat, and I want it to be comfortable and usable even more so. And usable and comfortable will start with that steering wheel. So yes, it is a stock wheel. It is nice and original, but it's not nice. They are far too big, and that means that the distance between the seat and the bottom of the steering wheel is very small. You're not getting your legs in under here without rubbing on the steering wheel, and it's not a great place. It only needs maybe a 1/2 inch or an inch more distance, and it would be perfect, which is what we're gonna aim for today. While we've got that steering wheel out, we're also gonna deal with this cluster. So the cluster obviously is not original. Someone has peeled all of the wood grain finish off it to expose the plastic underneath. The GT ones are painted in kind of like a grey paint, and a lot of people pulled off the wood grain to either put a different surface on it or to somewhat emulate that GT look. I actually did that myself, but back in my day, we didn't have really nice 3M vinyls that you could replace it with, so I ended up with some garbage contact on it. It was horrible, but anyway, I was young and stupid, and that's my excuse. I don't have that excuse now. Well, maybe not the young part at least anyway. So we're gonna pull this and I'm gonna replace it with an OEM one, and while I'm doing that, I'm gonna try and address the gauges. So the park brake and brake warning lights don't work, the charge light and the oil light don't work, and this random gauge for oil down the bottom, it turns on, but it basically flicks all the way past the maximum, so I don't know whether it's actually working and it's the wrong scale, or whether the gauge is broken and then I have no clue about my oil pressure. Speedo and tacho both work, so we're just going to transfer them over to a new dash and hopefully we'll get that looking all OEM again. One of the other things that I'm going to try to address is if we look at this dash here, let me pull the cover off. You can see it's like a purpley color here, and then it is a black further down. And basically it has been retrimmed in the same material that they obviously did these seats in. This is a very similar velour kind of a finish, but also this purple is not deliberate, that is sun fade. So I'm gonna try and sort that out. And if I do manage to get it looking good, in one of the future episodes, we're also gonna do these chairs, because you can see on the driver's seat, it's starting to lighten up a bit between the back and the base because this is getting more sun. And then finally is the carpet. I mean, first things first, it's brown and it's being worn through in certain areas where heels or pedals touch things. Not only does it look ugly, it's also starting to smell. So it does feel really dusty and musty in here when you're in it. And that's because of the carpet, realistically. So that is actually where we're going to start. Going to pull the seats front and rear, pull the old carpet out. We'll pull the steering wheel off, the center console out, and then we will get the old carpet out and we will start a process to replace it with some new carpet. Now this is from Knox Auto Carpets. I think it's actually for an RA23, but most of the carpet places I've seen don't specify any difference between 23s and 28s. So we're just gonna hope that the back section of this fits. So let's skip ahead now and come back when all that junk's out of the cabin. All right, so carpets are out and it's looking pretty good under here. There is a couple of things. Firstly, there's obviously along this side, at some point, someone's driven over something. And the area where the accelerator pedal connects to the floor is slightly dented and pushed up. There's another dent here, and you can see that the sound deadening material is cracked around it. And then there's this here. And not only is there a lot of sound deadening cracking away, but there's also, if we get close to that, this here, put my finger behind it on the other side, and that's actually a split. So it's been hit hard enough just to sort of crack through the floor, and that would let moisture in if this thing ever got wet. So I'm gonna have to weld that up, and while I'm there, this has got a case of the standard thing for these cars, which is the seat mount cracking. This is just something that happens on these cars. It's a weak point. What are you gonna do? And in fact, what we are gonna do about it is we are going to weld this up. I'm gonna strip it back, we'll weld it up, and I'll also put a reinforcing piece of metal in here. Apart from this though, it's not too bad. This is pretty much ready to go. Let's have a look at the carpet itself. So here we've got the old carpet, and you can see, this is the rear carpet. You can see how big that slit was that was cut for the handbrake. Way too big for what was in there. But you can see not only is there a lot of wear in general on this, but there's also a lot of areas where the dye is fading out on the carpet and it's turning from black to brown. This is really more evident on the front half, which makes sense because the front, especially right up near the seats here, that's where the sun hits. All of this is really in the footwell, so it's pretty well protected. And then in comparison, that is our new carpet. So it's a loop carpet. I wanted to stick with the more traditional loop pile. And the main thing when fitting these things is you've got to get your mounting holes right, and you've got to make sure that everything sits neatly before you start chopping holes in it. So the recommended way to do this is to lay the old carpet on top of the new carpet and then use chalk to mark all of the holes that you need to cut. And then you fit it into the car and you cut the holes out sort of one by one, just being careful. You don't want to go mark out a whole bunch of holes, cut them all out, and then realize everything's off by ½ an inch. You end up having to stretch the carpet or bunch it up in certain areas to get all those holes to match up, or you have to cut new holes and you just leave orphan holes throughout the carpet like Swiss cheese. So yeah, with that in mind, I'm going to fix this mount first, and then we'll start working on getting this carpet in. All right, so I've got the front and rear insulating mat in. I managed to get each of those in as a single piece, which is pretty cool. Obviously, the less pieces you have in here, the less chance of gaps, the less chance of sound transmission or uneven carpet and things like that. It's not 100% required, but it's nice to be able to do it. So firstly, you'll notice that I painted all of the seat mounts black as I was going around with the can to sort this out. Obviously this needed to be covered to be protected, but I painted these ones black because I'm gonna have to cut enough of the carpet away from around all of these areas for the seat rails to sit directly on the metal and be bolted through nice and tight. And so by painting them black, it just means in the areas where you would have normally seen the floor, it won't be bright green and it won't stick out like dog's balls. Now, the other thing is in the front. So you'll notice this is deliberate. I have not put the holes in under here for the accelerator pedal mount. I've put bolts back in them to stop water coming through, but I'm not intending to put that hinge pedal back on. I will be changing the carb on this, which you guys will get to see in a future episode, and that will likely require a cable conversion to the accelerator pedal, meaning that pedal will go and I'll get a new one in that doesn't hinge off the floor. Now, if you're ready for a large glass of stupid, you can see what I just did with the handbrake. So I cut out that shape for the underlay, and then the carpet itself has a nice raised point where the handbrake goes. And silly me, because this doesn't come out, normally I would pull that off and use it to template what I needed to do. But I kind of just eyeballed it based on the raised shape in the carpet, and I ended up cutting it way too big. The one piece of advice I was going to give you guys is when you're cutting holes and things, sneak up on it. You will have seen me cut the carpet at the front, and for the gear stick lever, which is quite a big hole, I've just cut enough for the lever. The tip with these normally is to lay the old carpet over the top and cut out the holes to match, but realistically they weren't original carpets, so a lot of the areas where there's holes, they actually just cut the whole edge off. So, you know, the carpet's cut here rather than going up because they wanted to avoid the seat rail. So I don't want to cut that much out because it leaves too much room for the carpet to move. So we're going to go a different method to putting them in. But basically I did the exact opposite here, and I just cut a huge amount out to start. And what I've had to do is put the old carpet in, and I've just gaffer taped it for now to see if it would be fixable. I'm pretty sure I can fix it, but we'll do a more long-term fix now and get this thing back in the car. But yeah, that is a complete bonehead move. Don't follow in my footsteps. All right, so we've got our hole. I put some black plastic behind it just to stop me getting anything on the bonnet. But what I'm actually going to use is a piece of cloth here because I feel like the cloth might absorb a bit of the hot glue a little bit better, whereas if I do hot glue this and I have a nice smooth piece of black plastic, the likelihood of it pulling off is probably higher. If I can get some soak through on this, I'll be happy. So all I'm going to do really is just go around this thing and hot glue near the edge. Should probably have gloves on for this because hot glue on your skin is not fun. But anyway. All right, I'm going to give that, 5 or 10 minutes to cool down just to make sure that this is actually going to stick properly. All right, so that's drying up. I'm just going to cut off the excess. All right, we can flip it over. All right, now that looks bad now, but I'm gonna let that dry. We'll get it in the car, and I think with a little bit of trimming and some adjustment to all the tufts and stuff around here, we can probably get this looking, halfway decent. I'm just trimming the pile back so that it's all one height, because that's really the thing that catches your eye when you're looking at the, I guess, the damage here. All right, so that repair is probably 90% of the way there. The loop pile covers a lot of sins, so in terms of a repair, I'm not that bothered with it, it'll be very hard to see. It's covered by the handbrake boot here, and it'll have the backrest of a chair either side of it. So it will be very hard to see. I'm mainly just annoyed that I cut it too big for the first place. That was a bonehead move, particularly after having in my mind not to go overboard here. I mean, the bottom line is you want to start with a small hole. It's fine to bore it out as you go, but in the end, you really do just want to sneak up on it. So that would be my tip for you guys moving forward, and I'm going to try and do the same on the front half now. And yeah, there's probably a couple of hours of work left in this, but once we're done, it should look a lot like this. And yeah, finished carpet, front and back in black. So, couple of things. Firstly, you can see where we're going to mount the seats. I've cut small holes in this piece of carpet. And that's so that we don't end up seeing too much of this rail through that when the seat's on. But like I said, I want to get a firm seating of the rail. So we cut this piece out here, and then on this piece at the front, there's enough cut out to take the front of the rail where it bolts through, and then it will just compress this carpet down. But I didn't want to make this too thick, so there's no underfelt there, and also I've cut out the carpet so that it's only one layer, okay? So this carpet's pretty thin. One layer is not gonna do too much there. I just didn't want to build up multiple layers. So yeah, pretty happy with the look of the carpet. That's gonna do us for now, and we are gonna move on, and we're gonna start with the instrument cluster. We've got to take that out, and then once that's out, we're gonna have a look at that dash cover. All right, so the instrument cluster, it's got a bunch of screws in it. There's one here, one there, and then one over in this vent. Take all four of those out, and then inside the ashtray, there's a couple more there. And then from memory, you have to take the knobs off the heater controls, and they just pull off, if I recall. Yeah, there's one. Won't pull them all off now, but yeah, pull those off, and then this should come out, and it'll come out sort of a couple of inches. And then if you look behind it, there's a bunch of electrical connectors on the back that obviously make all this operate. And there's also a speedo cable connecting into the back of the speedometer. So what we're gonna do is pull this out, and then we will take a look at that. I will put the camera down for a second, and I'll show you this once I've got it to the point where we can see the back of it. Oh, and I forgot, once you get the knobs off these four things, there is some screws behind this panel. It pops off. You can see there's a little relief just there. Get a screwdriver behind it, and you can then just sort of lever this out. All right, so with that out, there's a little clasp on the back, and then it comes out, and you've got a bunch more screws in here. All right, and we're free. So I can lift that up over, and if we look at the back of these, there are just some plugs, some random plugs there. There is one that should look like a clock on the back of this one. Let's see if I can get it out. There we go. Just a loom connector there. So we're just gonna unplug those two. Again, I need two hands for this stuff, so I can't do it while I show you. And then there is this ugly thing, which has got a bunch of different wires, and it's just coming out. So I'm just gonna snip them and then deal with them to make sure they're not gonna cause a short later. So we'll get all this out, and then we'll have a look at what we're dealing with. All right, so we've got the entire instrument cluster out now, including the speedo and tacho. On the back of that, you have 3 spots for your lights, your illumination. You have one of those large looms that goes in the center there, the same as that black one over there. And then you have this silver thing, which is the back of the speedo drive. And that connects into this thing here. It's basically just a press down clip on the side, and it slides out. It's not too difficult to get out. It's a little bit awkwardly placed, but that's it. So with all the instruments out, now we can focus on the dash pad. And the first thing I'm gonna wanna do here is to mask it up. So we're just gonna go, all right, there we go. That is possibly the shoddiest masking in history, but this is Doofa Now, and you'll get the idea of what we're trying to do. So it's all masked up, and I'm gonna use this product, which is Auto Glim Black Dye. So it's supposed to be a dye for staining fabrics. The directions say rubber, plastics, metal, and fabrics. So, it's black paint. I don't think it's normal automotive black paint though. We'll see when it sprays out. I'm not gonna do a big how-to on this because I'm not sure if this is gonna work yet, which is why I'm testing it on the dash and not the seats. I'm going to try this out off camera, and if it is decent, we'll run through the whole process on the seats in the next episode. All right, so mixed results, but I'm going to leave that to dry now, and in the meantime, we're going to work on something else. Illumination, because if you own a first gen Celica or you've driven one at night, you will know that the illumination on the gauges is pretty much garbage. So we're going to try and do something about it. All right, so on the back of the main instrument cluster, you have 3 globe holders, and these globe holders, you just twist them counterclockwise and pull them out, and they hold a incandescent wedge globe. So if I pull that out, funnily enough, it's called a wedge globe because it kind of just wedges in there, all right? Now these don't really throw a lot of light, and the light that they do throw is also really warm. It's a very yellowy, greeny even color by the time it comes through the front of the gauges. So yeah, it doesn't illuminate the best. While I don't want blindingly bright lights because that ruins your night vision, I would like something a little bit better. So this used to be a big deal back in the day. Trying to get brighter lights for the dash was actually fairly difficult. But nowadays, modern LEDs makes things a lot easier. So we've got a couple of options here. Now I just went down to JCar Automotive, and the first thing that they were able to supply me were these. And these, if we look closely, they are just a standard LED version of that. And I was hoping they would be brighter than they are, but I have tested these and they're about equivalent to the incandescent. Now they are a much cleaner, higher Kelvin light. I think that's the term for it. So they're a whiter light than these, but they don't throw that much more light. And these were about $2 to $2.50, I think. So by the time, you need about 6 of them, I think, for the full gauge cluster. Pretty inexpensive upgrade if you just want something that looks a little bit cleaner, but isn't necessarily brighter. So yeah, not quite bright enough for what I wanted. So we went to plan B. And plan B is a similar wedge type globe, but right, if we're getting close, you can see there are 4 LEDs on the end of that unit. So hopefully we've got about 4 times the light output. I know that's not particularly scientific, but yeah, we should have a lot more light output. The only drawback to these is it's very directional. All 4 LEDs point straight out the end. So if this is firing directly into a piece of plastic, we're not going to get the spread of light. So I don't know how this is going to go either. Now there is a third option in terms of globes. So in addition to, look, these are all just white or clear lights. I did try a red light, not because I like red, but I'm used to driving BMWs, and BMWs actually have an orange light. And I believe the theory behind the orange light is it's better for your night vision as well. So orange lights are what they used to use in aircrafts on all the gauges back in the day. And for a aircraft themed car, having orange dash lights and having it really quite bright without affecting your night vision would have been kind of nice. What I was going to use for that is some T10, and all of these wedge globes are known as T10 wedges, some T10 LED indicator globes. So they would have been amber, and they also would have been very bright, hopefully. So the problem with that is I've got a lead time because you can't get anything like that locally, so I've got to order on eBay and it's going to be a few weeks. So we're going to try the 4 LED white globes for now, see how we go, and if I'm still not happy with it, then we'll get a set of orange ones in there later. And in terms of putting these in, it is dead easy. You're just twisting and removing the old holder, pull the globe out, give it a wiggle, and then put the new globe in. Now, the only thing with LED globes is you have to get the polarity right. At incandescent, it doesn't matter which sides are positive and which sides are negative, but with an LED, it has to be the right way around. So I found the best way to do that is just a trial and error, to be honest. So just put it in, I'll plug it into the loom, and then whichever ones don't work, I will flip them back around. And 2, and number 3. Now it's the middle of the day, so I don't expect you guys to be able to see this on camera, but I'm going to go and test these and I'll come back and make sure they're the right way around. All right, so a couple of those were the wrong way around, but look, if you guys want to test it easily at home, this pin here is the negative, so I can hook a negative up to that, and then I'll take my tester. If you have one of these test tools, makes things really easy because you can just touch it against the positive, which is this one here. Then all you have to do is throw some power to it. All right, and then looking closely behind each one, you can see that each one's running. So We've got new globes in, which is good. All right, so on the other cluster, you actually have 4 globes on the back. And that's not to give it more light than this main cluster. It's because 2 of those 2 light the cluster up, and these 2 are just for the warning lights for the oil and charge, right? So what I'm gonna do is replace these ones with the 4 LEDs so that we get sort of matching illumination. And then the 2 for the warning light, I'm just gonna put the slightly dimmer LED globe in it because I only have 5 of the big ones. And you know, I've got them out, might as well replace them with something that's far less likely to break in the future. And then rather than try and decode what this pinout is for, this one's much easier just to plug in. You can pull it right out of the console anyway, and you can really see if these are running or not. So I'm gonna try those. My issue with these is that I don't have working charge and oil lights at the moment. So we will see whether they were globes that were killing those, or whether it's because the alternator signal and the oil pressure signal are not running correctly. So for the lights that illuminate the console, you can just look at these little plastic pins that hold the screen on, and when I turn the lights on, you'll see they light up. One there, one there. We've definitely got both those LEDs running. Now we really just need to see the charge and the oil lights come on. And I'll turn off everything else. And neither are lighting up at the moment. So I'm just gonna swap them around. That is as easy as taking the holder out, turning it around 180 degrees and putting it back in. Oh, okay, so there we go. We've got working charge light. We don't have a working oil light. Let me check on that one because from memory in the bay, this thing down here was a little loose. So, no oil yet. Now, someone had obviously messed around with this to put that oil gauge in, so my signal wire may actually be one of these down here. So tracing all these wires is probably not relevant to you because your car is not going to have the same thing, so we're just going to jump away and I'll come back once this is fixed. All right, so we're back. If I turn the key now, we have both charge and oil lights, but there's a problem. If you see, they don't really light up uniformly. I think the LEDs are 2 directional as well, so I'm going to switch these back to the incandescent. Basically the issue here was around the oil light was that the previous gauge installer had cut the loom, which is the yellow with black stripe for the oil pressure switch, and they had cut it right down the bottom of the plug, so I had to de-pin it. I actually cut a section out of the loom for the Celica and then grafted this back in, and I also de-pinned the one that goes on the back of the clock, and I took the plug off it and put it on this one. So now at least I've got a plug which will go into the back of the clock. I'm not expecting this thing to work, they never do, but this one at least looks good. The you see the needle in it is still orange and it's relatively straight. So we'll use this one and it'll probably light up, but that's about all it'll do. Now, in terms of the dash, you can see it in all its glory now. So look, it's definitely a lot blacker than it was before. It's still got a little bit of purple feel to it, and it's not as uniform as I would like, but I think what I'm going to do is just let it really cure up, and then I'll go back and I'll give it a proper like vacuum and rub some microfiber through it, because what it is the pile is sort of like a velvet pillow. The pile is kind of set now in different directions, so I tried to keep it all one direction as I did it and spray as best I could. The spray was really interesting. It was kind of like, it was definitely dye. It was very thin and it sprayed a lot of volume, and it was really quite tricky to apply. So I feel like I've got my eye in on it now, and when we go to do the seats in the next episode, which I am going to do, I will have some proper tips for you guys. And now it's time for reassembly. Going to get all these cleaned up and then just put them back in like that. All right, all back together, and man, it is looking awesome. For starters, it's solidly in now and it's not hanging and falling apart like it used to be. So yeah, a lot of bolts were missing in here and things like that, but the biggest things to me are it's all complete now, and also the gauges are really nice and cleaned out. Now the gauges themselves I actually cracked open and cleaned them right out, and then I got the Milwaukee polisher and polished up inside and outside of the lenses. and man, they came up a treat. Even the clock, I mean, like I said, the clock's not gonna work, but I've even got the little winder button for it, and I've got the one on the speedometer as well. So yeah, it's all looking pretty sweet. I also changed the shroud over to one that isn't warped, so you know, I had to grind that out before. This is no longer like that. And the only real issue with this is, when I turn it on, we got charge and oil, and you'll notice you can still see where the globes are, but it's nowhere near as obvious as it was with the LEDs in there. But I didn't check the brake light globe, and I'm pretty sure it's blown. I've tried checking the connections on everything. The parking brake works. If I take the park brake off, it goes off. Yeah, I think the actual brake one needs a new globe. So I may change that out when I try the amber lights, if I try the amber light. So yeah, it's looking really good. Next, I'm gonna put the center console in and the seats and finish up the, the kick panels and the scuff plates for the sills. And then we're gonna come back and put the cherry on top, and that is a brand new steering wheel, the piece de resistance. So, yeah, there's no point showing you this again. I am also gonna add a few bits and pieces to the console just to make it a little bit more complete, but it's gonna be a bit of a hack job, so we're not gonna go through it in detail. If I ever get to the point where I can build up a proper console, I will be sure to do a full episode on it. So yeah, ready for another jump? Oh my God, that was a mission, but man, this has come out so sweet. Check out the center console. That came out so much better than I expected. Basically, I had an old radio lying around. I didn't have a face plate. All of this fascia panel and everything, that was all the backing of it's cracked. So it didn't clip into the console the way it should. You know, the standard stuff that happens to all of these over time. So what I did was I actually built a sheet metal backing plate for this entire area. So I bent up some sheet metal on the bending brake. That thing is still paying dues, definitely getting the value out of it. I traced out the areas for the radio first and used that to get everything centered. And then when I dropped the fascia plate over it, I marked out the areas for the buttons and this pocket. I don't think this pocket is an RA28 one. It looks very close, but I think the RA28 one might be molded in. Maybe this is an RA40, but it fits and it looks factory, so I'm stoked with it. I left this one here to blank off this hole at the moment because this is where the aircon will go, but I haven't installed the aircon yet. And the aircon button, they are hard to find. Now I definitely have one, maybe two, but they are probably at the bottom of storage boxes somewhere in the storage unit. So for now, I'm just leaving it blanked off, and when we fit the aircon, we'll put that in. Then it was just a case of giving the whole thing a coat of primer, a couple of coats of black spray paint, and then fitting it all back together. For now, this thing looks absolutely amazing. The dash came up to probably 90 to 95%. All of the gauges look amazing. I don't know if I told you guys before, but the LEDs, while they're not super bright, they are a lot cleaner. Here's a shot of them before, and here's a shot of them after. And yeah, now those shots were done on a manual setting, so you can, the brightness should be representative. But yeah, it's all looking sweet. Put the gear knob back on, put the seats in front and back, and now we've got to address the steering wheel situation. And this might upset some of you guys, but this is what we are going with. It is an MPI wheel, and if I flip that box around, it is an Adam LZMFG suede steering wheel. Now, as I said, this may not be everyone's cup of tea, but bear with me. If you look at the suede, it matches the dash really well, and it also matches the fabric on the seats, and so does the orange fade there. That light orange to almost red really does match the piping on the seats well. So look, this wasn't planned for this car. I think it's just played out excellently, and I reckon it's going to be an amazing looking steering wheel once we get it on. So let's do that, and then I will give you one last look over the whole car, and we'll finish this episode out. All right, so there it is, and I stand by my decision. I think it looks awesome. The orange stitching on the wheel and the top matches in perfectly with the rest of the car. It even ties in with the wood grain of the dash and things like that. So I'm super stoked with that. The only problem is it's a quick release. This Boss kit does not fit the bolt pattern of the wheel. I had that one lying around. I thought it would be good. I didn't think to measure it, and now it has bitten me in the ass. So it's too late today. I'm gonna have to go out tomorrow and try and find one of those and potentially have to order one online from the US if this is a, I don't know, an imperial size spacing and we only do metric over here or something. I don't know. But if I put this back, if that's what it's going to look like when it's finished, I think it is well worth the effort. So we've got all of the seats back in. Carpet came out a treat. The seats are the next disappointment. They have faded here from the sun, similarly on there and on the top. So that may be what we're doing next week. I don't know. I might also break out the R34 and fix the aircon and the heater core on that one. We will see. And because I know you guys are going to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, while you're doing that, you might as well tell me, do you want to see another episode on the RA28 next week? Or do you want me to break it up a bit and throw in the R34? Anyway, that is going to do us for today. There's just a couple of things. So firstly, if you were one of the people who won a t-shirt as part of the merch pack for the 50th episode, the viewers that won them from the US, you should have your shirts now, I hope, or at least they'll be coming very soon. The people in Australia, unfortunately, if you've been watching the news, train derailment, so apparently the shipment is stuck somewhere. I hope it wasn't on that train and it's just an issue with the delivery based on the fact that there's derailments and other plans have to come up. But I really am trying to get them to you guys for Christmas, and I'll do the best I can. So yeah, that just leaves us with the end of the episode stuff. So if you look behind me here, we have Violet Crumbles on the rotisserie. I'm going to put the full Violet Crumbles series linked to up here, and I'm going to link to the full Doofa Now series just down here. Other than that, I just want to say thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on the Build Room. Bye for now.